what are your core memories growing up in an Asian household?
This one is an interesting one. I didn't experience what a lot of the stories you hear are.
How did you feel when he said that? Do you remember that?
I do. I remember being embarrassed.
When you decided to become an entrepreneur, did you tell your parents right away?
To this day, she sometimes when she's upset, she will say, when will you get a real job and stop embarrassing me? If we don't as a community speak up about the things that are happening to us, people in positions of power that hold the money and the decisions don't know to pay attention to us. I can't tell you how many times people ask me, is there really racism against Asians? Do you think you're making a big deal out of nothing? Fair questions, but they're wrong.
When I was living in Brazil, and I had big clients, big corporate clients, and it was always like, I was fighting like against myself, like, right. Like I don't feel confident, I don't feel confident enough. And this is the reason I'm doing this, because it's exactly what I'm not supposed to be doing. Because, it's something, I'm not a communicator, and also still have the language barrier. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, if I'll wait for the perfect time, and when my English is perfect, when, I got all the skills and experience and everything, it will never happen, right? So I just thought if I have like 15 more years or 20 more years, what would you do? Like I started to question myself, like, what would you do if you just have a few more years? Because I'm already 44, I'll be turning 45 next month. And just thought, okay, if I have 15 more years, like, what would you choose? Like, I wouldn't keep doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Although I feel comfortable, I know what I'm doing, and I've been in this property management industry for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And it's just thought, just realized that, I want to do something new. And I'm feeling that I'm learning something new, although I still think I have to improve a lot of things, right? Yeah. But I felt amazing when I was doing the first episode with Grace Park. I felt something I've never felt like this before, and maybe this is something I should keep just keep doing. Yeah, there's like 100 voices in my head saying, "Stop what you're doing. You're not, not supposed to do that." And there's one voice saying, like, "Keep doing it." I don't know why, but there's just one voice, right? Saying that. So yeah, that's why I'm here. That's why I decided to create an Instagram account and YouTube videos, because I like to watch. Yeah, and I like that visual. Like when I see your reactions. And everything. Yeah. So I love podcasts in general, but the video, the visual is something really important.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's the story you're sharing is such a universal story about fear holding us back in our work, and maybe that work not being our passion, and how do we take that leap to try something that, and there's never a right time, but how do you cross that threshold of fear, of self-doubt? Yeah. Very cool. So cool.
Yeah. Happy to have you here today, and have any questions before we start?
No, it's super cool though. I'm honestly just now even realizing the fact that you never did this before is another element of inspired and just admiration. Good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Wow.
Okay. So today I have a very special guest. Her name is Audrey Wong. Did I mispronounce your name?
Perfect.
Is that right?
Yes.
She used to be a lawyer, and now she owns a company, and she also runs an amazing nonprofit called Elimin8Hate. Hi, Audrey.
Hi, Fabio. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Yes, I'm Asian podcast.
Thank you.
And happy Asian Heritage Month, right?
Yes, happy Asian Heritage Month.
Thank you. Can you just tell us a little bit of your background?
Sure. So I am a Chinese Canadian born and raised in Vancouver. And I was a little bit of a youth that didn't have a lot of direction. And it actually took me until the age of 29 before I went to law school. Honestly, at the time, I was motivated by someone I was dating. And they were putting me down for the work I had chosen and saying that I didn't, I was smart, but I didn't apply myself.
Right.
And thank you to him. We don't speak anymore, just a passing person in my life, but he motivated me to study for the LSAT to get into law school. So went to law school for 3 years, got a great job at a big firm, and very quickly realized that that was not the life for me. It was too tedious. It was too rules-based. You had to work really, really hard. And so I ended up actually, very fortunately, becoming the youngest executive at a government distribution company that distributes liquor. I spent a couple of years there and also realized that government was too restrictive for me. And I had the great fortune of being part of the cannabis legalization. And government, the BCLDB that I worked for was actually tapped to operationalize and legalize it. So it gave me this perfect opportunity to reach out to all these companies that were coming on board and say, hey, I have the skill set, I'm in the market. And I ended up being a vice president of one of the multinational publicly traded companies, spent a couple of years there until COVID hit. And mass layoffs, got laid off. Great time for me to start my own company, take that plunge, just like the story you were sharing of we're kind of riding this path and this path is fine. But was it making us feel fulfilled? Was it giving us the sense of joy and purpose? And for me, I thought starting a company was a great opportunity to say, what do I want to do and how do I make those decisions for myself? So now I run a company called Zyre, which is a cannabis company. And then I also run a nonprofit that advocates for Asian Canadians called Elimin8Hate. And that's kind of what brings me here today.
Wow. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
What do you remember? Like, what are your core memories growing up in an Asian household?
This one is an interesting one. I think because I grew up in Vancouver. And Vancouver had a massive immigration boom, starting in the 80s and through to the 90s. I didn't experience what a lot of the stories you hear are. I didn't feel embarrassed. I brought rice to school every day. And I never thought that was weird. No one ever told me it was weird. The only time I realized it was weird was when a teacher, obviously a white teacher, pointed out that it was not healthy. It was not food safe to bring cooked food and not refrigerate it.
Did she say that?
She said that. She's like, this is not, food safe. Your food's sitting there in room temperature. It is breeding bacteria. But it never connected with me any sort of, I didn't think anything of it. Growing up, I wasn't mocked for being Asian. So I was, I think, very fortunate in that sense that I didn't feel like an other at that time. If anything, growing up in a community that had so many East Asians, I really felt like this was normal. It was small little inklings that started letting me see. Like the coolest kid in class, he was a very cute white boy. And I had a crush on him like everybody did. And one time he told me to go back where I came from. And it's interesting, again, the totality of my experience was belonging. But this one instance that happened to me 30 years ago, I remember enough to recount to you this day, right? So it's such an interesting experience of you can belong until the moment that you realize maybe someone's telling you don't belong. And then it's ingrained into your memory. So I will say my core memories are of belonging, of being a part of a collective that I completely fit in. But on the other side, I have core memories of that moment of, I realize that foundation can be shaken to the core with just one saying.
How did you feel when he said that? Do you remember that?
I do. I remember being embarrassed, mortified, because he was cooler than me. He was better looking than me, right? So I remember those feelings of embarrassment, and I remember feeling confused. And I also now, again, 30-something years later, am recounting it to you. Like, how powerful is that, those words that we use, and how much it, like, someone can carry it for so long.
So you were not aware of it when it actually happened, right?
I think what we're aware of as children is so interesting. We're aware of what we're exposed to, what we watch on TV, what we watch in all these things. And what I was exposed to growing up in Vancouver was media where Asian people weren't represented. And of course, if we were represented, we were nerds, we had accents, we were foreigners. But I never thought that was me, right? I'm born here, I'm Canadian. I saw that as all the immigrants and all the foreigners that were coming. And so unconsciously, society growing up created this divide within us, the Asians that belonged and the Asians that were outsiders. Mm-hmm. And so I never saw myself as an outsider. And so when he said that to me, I felt guilt and shame. But it was so interesting, if I really try to dive deep down, that shame and guilt and the wrongdoing wasn't done by him. It almost is like then you redirect and project it again at these immigrants and outsiders that are coming and inadvertently putting you into this bucket with them, right? I remember being young and being so judgmental about Asians that were not born in Canada. And now realizing all these years later, it's colonialism and white supremacy that made me internalize self-hatred against my own community, right? Like, I'm not like you. You're Asian, and I'm Canadian Asian. But in the end, everyone sees us as the same. They see us as Asian, right? And then that's been a very self-reckoning that I've been coming to terms with over the years of who I used to be, how I used to view my community, and now becoming a leader in racial equity activism. Yeah. Like we all have to come to terms with our own past and our own bad behavior.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's interesting, right? Because I remember and also when I was a kid, most of my friends were like mainly white, and I didn't realize that. And I wanted to be like them. So I think it's similar. We have similar experiences, right?
Yeah.
But the way you internalize it is different.
Yeah. Totally.
So each person has your own way to, to internalize it, and then when later in life, then you realize, like that really affected me as a person, right?
Yeah, we've internalized this pitting ourselves against each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's the right way to describe it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We've grown, we evolve, we become aware, right?
Yeah, you're right. So back to your career, like you used to be a lawyer, and we were talking about this before we started. How was the transition from being a lawyer to, becoming an entrepreneur?
So being a lawyer, kudos to all lawyers out there. One thing is you have to be bright. You really have to be bright. You have to be a hard worker. But what being a lawyer didn't celebrate is, in my opinion, risk-taking, innovation, just like a zest for life. And now as an entrepreneur, I get to take risks. I get to make decisions about things that fundamentally impact the trajectory of my company and in my life. And I get to do it in ways that are meaningful and passionate to me. So one of the things with Zyre is, sure, I make cannabis, but I'm not a massive consumer. I'm not in the cannabis industry because I love cannabis and I'm a stoner or I consume all the time. But I know that this is an industry where it's severely lacking in representation and visibility of minorities and women, and that Zyre can make a difference Zyre can share stories, and Zyre can represent and show that, hey, Asians are not a monolith, right? This whole conversation about the model minority, let's turn it upside its head. A model minority can also be a weed dealer, right? A model minority can also be an advocate and an activist. So I find that that brings a lot of meaning to me when in being an entrepreneur, and specifically a cannabis entrepreneur.
I also remember you said that sometimes you feel lonely, right?
Oh yeah.
And that's one of the reasons, like you be like having this business in this like a male dominated industry. Can you say that?
Yeah. I'd say that innately being an entrepreneur is lonely, especially if you're an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur that owns your own business and you don't have partners. So innately it's lonely, with or without being a minority and underrepresented. Then you add to it that your people tend to generally be friends and have a network of people that are like them, right? Share similar interests, maybe, and even, let's face it, kind of look like us or similar to us. So a lot of my network are not entrepreneurs. And it's probably because, generally speaking, entrepreneurialism is about risk-taking. It's about some level of almost naive optimism, of self-belief, right? I believe I'm the best. I believe I can succeed when no one else can. And there's probably some level of being Asian and being a woman, but that's not what you're taught to believe. You know, being Asian and being a woman is largely, in some ways, being taught to be safe, not a risk taker, taking a comfortable, safe job. So that starts making the pool and the network of people I know as entrepreneurs smaller and smaller and smaller, especially in cannabis. So I have found it to be lonely. I found a lot of the events that I go to, I don't see a lot of people that look like me, that have my lived experiences. And yeah, it can be tough. With that said, I chose this path, and the benefits of, again, being able to create my own path and share the story that I feel is important to share outweighs that. And I have to actively go out and look for like-minded people and people that aren't necessarily visible in this community. So I often go out of my way to connect with Asian entrepreneurs in cannabis and share our stories. I go on my way to connect with women entrepreneurs just to try to build that network so that we can build the community and share our lived experiences and break down that isolation.
When you decided to become an entrepreneur, what was your parents' reaction? Did you tell your parents right away? Was it tough for you to tell them that, okay, I'm just gonna leave this stable job, being a lawyer, and I'm gonna try something new.
Yeah.
And also the your industry, right?
Okay, there's so much to unpack in that question. So the first things is, in some ways, my parents fulfilled the stereotype of keep your safe job. There's one point I worked for government. I worked for WorkSafe BC, and my mom did not want me to leave WorkSafe, even though the job itself was, I was just there, right? I wasn't climbing any ladders. I wasn't doing anything groundbreaking, but she's like, it's a secure job, stay. So that happened during that time. Once I left that, she didn't even want me to be a lawyer. It was too risky. So that part moved on. Like, the entrepreneurial part wasn't so much a sticking point anymore. And what my mom fails to recognize in the family, she's the original entrepreneur. Like, actually, she, in the late 80s, she went and started her own clothing company. She's just set up shop in Vancouver, and then she ended up having 2 shops. And this is a time, this is not a time where it's necessarily favorable to Asian people, let alone a woman starting her own business and becoming a breadwinner for her family. So I think she forgets that sometimes, that she was the original risk taker and she made me like this. But going back to your question, the entrepreneurial part, not as big of a deal. I was also very fortunate. My mom genuinely, and again, this is not common, she instilled in me from the time I was a kid that I was smart, I was competent, I was going to be successful. And she repeated it so much that I believe that in myself. I know a lot of my friends in the Asian community don't hear that a lot. They hear you're not very smart, just stick to what's safe. But I'm very fortunate my mom really reinforced this belief. However, cannabis, whole different story. I didn't tell her when I left. I was actually working at liquor first, but it's government. I left liquor to work for cannabis, not as an entrepreneur, but at a really big company. It was a great position. I didn't tell her for a month. I went to a conference it used to be a liquor conference that I would go every year, but it became a liquor and cannabis conference. I went for cannabis, but I let her believe that I was still going because of the liquor job.
Oh, wow.
So I went, and at this point I'm in my 30s. Like this is like the concern and the shame I felt was so interesting. I think that's definitely cultural, like the shame of shaming your parents. And so I didn't tell her for a month. I rehearsed it. I speak Chinese enough, but not enough to be eloquent. So I practiced with a friend who spoke Chinese to make sure, because it's tough to communicate with her just in English. So I practiced it in Chinese to tell her that I moved to cannabis, and I rehearsed it. And I got up the courage in my 30s to tell my mom that I went to work for cannabis. To this day, she sometimes, when she's upset, she will say, when will you get a real job and stop embarrassing me?
Is that right?
Yeah. Like I can't tell people what you do, the aunties and uncles, it's embarrassing. But she also has to accept that this is the daughter that modeled herself after her. Again, she's the original entrepreneur.
Wow. That's a strong message, right? I mean,
the shame.
The shame, yeah.
The shame, yeah.
So it's always like part of our lives, like not, especially for an Asian community, right? It seems to be like present in most people's lives.
Shame, I think, is a word that I hear tossed around in the Asian community among my Asian friends very commonly. Like we feel it, what we shame to our family. Where I definitely, in my white friends, I think that's so foreign to them. Like the thought of shaming their family and their actions
it's not a big deal.
I don't even think they understand that concept, and not in a bad way, but we just don't have that intertwining of obligation and family obligations and how our behaviors impact our family and the shame we bring on them. That's, I think, distinctly an Asian thing and distinctly an immigrant thing, maybe.
It's funny because we definitely feel it. We can feel the shame, but we don't want to talk about it.
What a crazy word, though. Shame.
Yeah.
Like
I think it's a heavy word if you think,
yeah.
The meaning of it. Anyways, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Can you explain what is Elimin8Hate?
Yeah.
What this is all about?
So Elimin8Hate, we're a nonprofit advocacy group, and we advocate for racial equity for Asian Canadians. And we try to do that by engaging through arts, film, and media. We recognize that people, especially newer generations, are primarily accessing information through media, social media, games, and it's different from traditional forms of information, podcasts. So we really try to use that appeal to engage in our target audience. As an example, we have a couple of ambassadors that are quite notable. Lainey Louie, who runs LaineyGossip.com. Zoe C, she's a Pulitzer Prize cartoonist finalist for the New Yorker. We have Eileen Park, who's a vocal activist and advocate, and we have Andrew Fung, who's from Run the Burbs and Kim's Convenience. So that's kind of our way of looking to share stories about visibility, representation, and inequities that Asian Canadians encounter, but by using language and mediums that are accessible to people.
Right. I have a question. Like I used to be like an introvert. I think I'm still an introvert person, but mostly like, behind the scene person. How can you reach that kind of profile? Like,
Wow. Okay. The truth of the matter is, in my experience, there's people out there who are very comfortable with attention, with public speaking. It's natural for them. That's actually not me. So I have a really unfortunate nervous tic, and it happens all the time. When I go speak in public, which is quite often, my mouth twitches uncontrollably. It twitches so bad that I can't smile. And so I end up stuck in this twitching phase where I'm trying to smile, and it freezes my face and it adds more stress. So it's but I also feel like I have it's my job. My job is to advocate. My job is to show up. And how do I balance that dichotomy? I was just 2 weeks ago, Elimin8Hate through a symposium. So I was interviewed by Global News Morning, Evening, Omni. There's a lot, and it's not easy. I think the way to think about it is, one, why do we do it? We do it because there is a message that we do need to share. And it's our job, it's our obligation, it's our responsibility. And it also makes us feel like we're making a difference, right? We're not just living life as passively. So it's one. And then the second is, how do you overcome that anxiety? The truth of the matter is, to this day, I show up and I still have it. So I haven't figured that out. I will say that I've done a lot of Googling, and apparently, magnesium and B12 and CBD and all these things work. So I'm constantly trying to dose myself and find the way to fix it, because it actually really hinders, to me. You don't want to show up looking like this when you're interviewing, but the benefits outweigh the negatives. I'm compelled to do it. I have to do it. And it's to some extent a calling, and I need to live up to it.
Right. Yeah. And you can also report an incident on your website, right?
Yeah. So what I'll say about that is, during COVID, we partnered with a couple of other groups, Project 1907 and CCN CSJ, to launch this hate incident tracker. It was very informative during COVID because there was a massive uptick in express hate, violent acts, and people were motivated to report it because our collective consciousness was awakened. But what we realized is that data is only as good as, of course, the reliability of that data. So there's a lot of different trackers floating about. There needs to be enough marketing and promotions to bring people there. The BC government's actually announced this spring they're going to launch their hate incident tracker. And it's not specific to Asians, but it's for everybody. And one of the key cruxes that we struggled with is making sure that the police, which a lot of communities struggle with trust and feeling comfortable with, aren't involved. So the government's launched this, has said expressly it's not involving the police. And right now, what we're focused on is working with the government to help them have a successful implementation. Let's have a one-stop shop where everybody can report hate incidences and crimes. So incidences are ones that don't necessarily elevate to a level of a criminal crime. It's someone yelled at you on the street and called you a name. It's not a crime, but that is an act of hate. So we'd love to support the government. We're working with them right now, and we'll do more of the marketing, the stakeholder engagements, the promotions, and use our network to spread the word. One of the things we really want people to recognize is reporting isn't about punishment. Like, the likelihood of that person being found, caught, prosecuted, and going to prison probably isn't that high. However, what reporting is so important for is data is what drives decisions and government decisions and how time, energy, and money is allocated. If we don't, as a community, speak up about the things that are happening to us, people in positions of power that hold the money and the decisions don't know to pay attention to us. And so we need to report things that are even trivial to us to make sure that people realize these are really real.
You have to
issues.
Normalize it, right?
Yeah. Like, they're real. And until we let people know, people I can't tell you how many times people ask me, is there really racism against Asians? Do you think you're making a big deal out of nothing? Fair questions, but they're wrong.
Yeah. And people are still reporting these incidents after COVID.
Not as much.
Not as much,
no,
right?
Like it's, I think like anything, we have a moment where we're impassioned to do something and then it starts, we lose focus. There's so many other stimulus coming at us.
Right.
But we will be renewing that energy and trying to share the information, going to community centers, sharing with people. If this happens to someone else, they may not report it. Like let's say your grandparents, but you have the power to report it. And we want to make sure it doesn't just become a spike in interest, but something that's normalized. We call it out when we see it. We report it when we see it.
Do you think it's possible to reduce hate crimes against Asians?
Absolutely. Gosh, if it wasn't possible, what am I doing, right? It's not easy. It's nuanced. There's so many different layers to it. There's the individual action level of I'm not going to put up with it, right? If I'm going to stand up with my voice to stop it, because now I'm not an easy victim. That's the most granular sense. Then you talk about organizations and institutions and what we can do, acknowledge, validate, institute policies that actually make these behaviors punishable to their staff, their team members. Then you go up another level. You talk about systems and government. Everything that is created by a person is subject to bias, unconscious bias. You know, the most simplistic ones we're talking about now is AI, right? You type in a search term. I think I just saw this one on Google. They typed in a search term of Asian man and white woman couple. And apparently no images showed up on Meta. Anytime they typed it, it showed an Asian man with an Asian woman.
Wow.
Right? And there's so much to unpack behind that. And a lot of people are like, well, there's just not enough data set to bring it. But, you know, what's the chicken and what's the egg here, right? So all these pieces need to come together to have monumental change. However, incremental change can happen in any step of that process, from the individual all the way to the systems. And it's someone's job, and in this instance, it's my job, to make sure we keep that conversation going.
I love our conversation. I hate to say this, but this is the end of our episode. You feel like promoting something? You want to say something before we finish?
I do. I'd say maybe this Asian Heritage Month, let's take some time to really develop an intention about it. You know, one hand, it's, hey, let's celebrate and acknowledge that as a community, we are amazing and we can amplify and uplift each other. But I would love for each of us to maybe identify a goal we'd like to achieve. So from the Zyre standpoint, my cannabis company, I want to use this as an occasion to turn that model minority myth on the head. I'm the model minority. I'm also a cannabis business owner. From the Elimin8Hate side, we're using Asian Heritage Month to highlight the fact that we as a community have internalized the self-representation of ourselves. And how do we project what we want society to see us as? You know, let's do away with the stereotypes and the tropes. Let's not self-deprecate and make fun of ourselves. Let's represent and be visible in our authentic selves and not resort to these jokes and memes that degrade ourselves. Like, I'd love that to be a meaningful intention behind Asian Heritage Month.
Right. Love that.
Thank you.
I have a little gift for you. This is the moment, one of my preferred moments on the pod. This is a little gift. I want you to open it.
Okay. I'll open it now?
Yep.
Thank you, by the way.
No problem. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. And, you know, again, Oh, I'm very inspired by you.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I'm also in my 40s, so I understand how we get into our comfort zones in 1 minute where we get to a point where we say we need to do something different, and there's never a good time to do it, and it's scary, but the time is now.
Yeah. You got to take actions, right? You can just
we only live so
think
long.
about it. Yeah. You already watched the first couple of episodes. You already know that this is a Japanese wind chime.
Okay. I'm going to Japan this Friday.
You're going to Japan, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can put it together.
Yeah. Oh.
And you can hang it if you want.
That is very cool. Thank you. What's the symbolism behind it?
So was originally made, they use it mainly in the summer.
Okay.
And they say, it's, against the evil. So as it's an Asian Heritage Month, I hope they can,
let's ward off hate.
Fight the hate crimes against the Asian community, right?
Goodbye, hate.
So, and whenever you hear that sound, I hope you will remember our conversation today.
Thank you. That's very sweet. I appreciate it.
Okay, this is it.
Okay, awesome.
Wow, you got a lot of things to say. I do feel that you can keep talking for hours and hours and hours. And again, I'm just starting to people they want to connect with me now because of the
it's
podcast.
So cool.
So this is
like how right?
It's amazing, right? And
it just happened. Like it's crazy.
Yeah. A month ago, I was like. I do have a personal account with my wife. We share the same account. So I didn't even exist before that.
And the gravity is hitting you now, right? Like,
right?
What could this become?
I don't know. Like
it's a lot of, that's a lot.
So you're going to Japan and what that's for pleasure or?
Yeah, I'm going for 3.5 weeks because I can remote work. So I figure, and there was a cheap flight from Zip Air. I don't know if you saw it when Zip Air launched these cheap flights. So I'm going to I've been before, but Japan is so likable. There's nobody who doesn't like Japan.
Right. Yeah.
I'll probably do the standard. I've
been there like a long time ago.
Yeah. So Tokyo, Kyoto, but I'm also going to make a point to go to Nara, which is where the deers
Nara,
are.
the deers, yeah.
And then Naoshima, which is the modern art island. Mm-hmm. So if all this art on the island outdoors, you bike around.
Yeah.
You see all the art. So that'll be cool.
I didn't ask you that, but I wanted to ask your name, your full name. How do you pronounce that?
Okay.
Suk Fan, but I know it might be different.
Yeah, it's different in Chinese, but
yeah.
In Chinese it's Wong Sok Fan, and in English it's there's no Audrey Sok Fan Wong. Yeah.
Yeah. Next time I want to make sure we can talk about our names because I do have this is my Japanese name.
We should have talked about that.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
You heard about Reclaim Your Name.
Because I've mentioned that before, like the first couple.
Yeah.
For episode 1 and 2 already, I don't want to repeat the same thing.
But
the next time you make sure, like, because you do have something, was checking your.
We had a massive campaign.
Yeah,
it was massive.
The campaign about the names,
Reclaiming your name and why people reject their given non-anglicized name or
So then I found this, I'm not sure if you know Kishu. She's a Japanese artist. She does Japanese calligraphy, the traditional and modern. So I asked her, can you redesign my name? I sent over the original one because I don't know if Chinese they do that. Like Japanese when they have a baby, they ask for someone to write the Japanese calligraphy, right?
Yeah.
For the baby, they hang it on the wall. You can keep it somewhere. So then my dad, he sent me a copy of it. So I sent it to her and I asked her to, can you redesign it based on
Yeah.
my current moment right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
And then that's how.
It looks good. It
Yeah.
because I've seen a lot of script type writing, and this one looks so much like quite natural, right?
Yeah.
Where a lot of times it looks very stiff, like someone who didn't know the language just stenciled it in.
So the name was one of the things I also decided to do something because, my name was something that I didn't
You
realize.
rejected.
Yeah, I internalized it, like and I started to hang out with some Japanese people, being part of working as a volunteer for a Japanese society in Vancouver. And then they don't think I'm Japanese. They think I'm something else, Chinese, Filipino, right? They don't think I'm Japanese because I don't speak the language. And then I said to them, like, I do have a Japanese name, which is Yugo. And that's when I started to think about it, like, okay, I do.
Yeah.
I'm also Japanese. I don't speak the language. I was born in Brazil. I don't like my name, but I do have a Japanese name. And then I remember the first day I came back from the tattoo artist, and was in my bedroom, and my daughter, she comes in. She's 6, and she said, "Well, what's that on your arm?" It's my Japanese name, and she said, "It's beautiful, Dad." She didn't know what was the meaning of it. Didn't explain the whole meaning, but it's my Japanese name, and she said it's beautiful. And then I felt something like, okay, yeah, my name is beautiful. I should, be happy that I have that name. That my parents, they gave me that name. So I spent most of my life saying to my parents, I don't like my name. Why did you choose that? Why why just gave me Fabio, which is it's not even a Brazilian name, it's an Italian name, right? And Ishikawa, my last name, we cannot, there's nothing we can do, like my last name, but my first name, I like it, but my middle name, why did you choose that? I kept repeating that to my parents.
Yeah.
And then didn't know how bad, they were. And after a while, they said, we were like, sometimes we felt like we were like disappointed and sad because when we chose that name, we were like thinking like he's gonna like it because it's a beautiful name, right?
Oh man!
So there's a whole
so much about identity and
meaning around
internalized
deep,
like racism and reclaiming that all and becoming aware is
and that's so the key word,
like emotional too, right? Like what was I before I became aware, right? It's intense.
It is.
Well, good for you. I think there's our lives at any given moment is evolving, right? Whenever people think as you get older you can't grow, learn, become more aware. But, we're testaments to that. We're both in our 40s. I didn't become an entrepreneur till my 40s. I didn't lead this nonprofit until my 40s. You didn't start this till your 40s. I don't know if this was in your 40s as well, becoming, reclaiming your identity, your heritage, right?
It's funny.
Yeah, that's unique to you, but also universally relatable to so many of us from this kind of immigrant.
That's what I've noticed.
Yeah. Well, thank you for waiting.
No, thank you.
I'm glad I reached out to you.